A commercial building project is organized in a particular way, and every step in the project is organized. So let's look at those steps. There are particular phases in the project and particular people responsible for things. And as I think we might have mentioned at the start of the term, AEC is an acronym that stands for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. So that's the world of people that we are talking about here. So a project goes through these particular stages, and they go in order, and we don't loop back and redo previous steps. We move straight through the process from beginning to end. Beginning with the lead designer, the owner hires the lead designer, who might be an architect or might be an engineer or might be a landscape architect. And first they figure out, okay, what is this project about? That includes inventory and analysis and a thing called programming. And programming is where we decide what is going to go on in this building. So it's a formal process. The designer will talk with the users of the building and very carefully map out what will and what will not be needed in there. And then they'll go on to schematic design, and this is a real general, non-specific sort of design where they're figuring out things like what should be adjacent to what? Do we want the restrooms next to the classrooms, and so on and so forth. So not shapes and sizes yet, but just how does the thing work? Then the designer goes into design development, and this stage might take, might take a year, year and a half, might be shorter. And at each stage in the development of the design, they get a little bit more precise, a little bit more focused in, and at some point, the design is complete. It is 100% design development. And at that stage, we go on to the construction documents. This is where you come in with the creating of the drawings. This is also where the spec writer comes in. And the project manual, as you know, includes not only specs, but instructions for bidding. So a bid happens, contractor is selected, and now we can begin construction. During construction, the owner steps back, and the architect or engineer, who is the lead on the project, is the owner's representative. So they are responsible for inspections at the job site and making sure that the work matches what the drawings and the specs say, and they review all the contract paperwork. Now, what you need to know is that written records are extremely important, and you and everybody on your team need to document everything that happens in writing. So, for example, if you have a conversation with a vendor and you guys and by guys I mean you people in the conversation, reach an agreement about what you're going to do, you document that phone call in a written record which you send to them and you ask their agreement. Even handwritten notes get saved. And then at the end of construction, we come to occupancy and operation and maintenance. O&M is an acronym which stands for operation and maintenance. Before the owner can take ownership again and move in, the building has to be certified for occupancy. And so the jurisdiction, like the building department, will issue that certificate. Now, oftentimes at this stage, a commissioning happens, and commissioning is a kind of feedback loop. It's a kind of audit step where a professional verifies that the things operate as they were intended. Oftentimes it's the HVAC system the airflow and all of that. But many other systems in a building can be commissioned, and commissioning is a very common step in a commercial project. Notice again, here's the acronym O&M, Operations and Maintenance. I should say, I didn't put a slide in here, but I should say that the architect or engineer will often prepare an owner's manual for operations and maintenance for O&M. Now, the relationships on a commercial project are clearly defined, and they are different than you would find in a residential project. In a commercial project, we have these three groups: the design team, the architect and engineer, the owner, and the contractor, and each of those has subgroups that report to them. Now notice how the contract is arranged. The owner has a contract with the designer, and the owner has a contract with the contractor, and then the designer has contracts with the subconsultants, and the contractor has contracts with the subcontractors. And notice you do not see any connecting lines between the subconsultants and the subcontractors. So this is a formalized communication structure governed by the contracts, and the consultants, if they have something to say or to ask, they must go through the lead designer. If the subs have something to say, they must go through the general contractor. So, for example, let's say you work for you work for a steel design consultant. So you do steel detailing. And there's a subcontractor who is a steel fabrication sub who does handrails. You, in your company, you are not allowed to go over to the job site and talk to that fabrication sub and suggest what you would like them to do. That is strictly not allowed through these contracts. So you have to go through your chain of command, they have to go through their chain of command. And that keeps everything adhering to what the contract says. Oh, I should say one more thing. I might have mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. When it's agreed that construction is going to start, the architect becomes the owner's representative, and the owner is no longer involved in communicating with the contractor, and therefore the subs or anybody else. So the owner is out of the loop, and it's the architect, as the owner's representative, who works with the contractor. The owner, by the way, could be a person, but it could also be a corporation. It could be a college. So when Lane Community College builds a building, LCC is the owner. So there are different ways to get this all, this contracting and bidding and construction process going. When a contract is signed, a contractor agrees that at a prearranged point in the design process, they will construct this project for an agreed upon sum of money. And where in the process that moment happens and what the reporting responsibilities of the contractor are, we kind of differentiate these different project delivery methods, and you may have run into these before. Probably the most common is called design, bid, build, and this is where this is the process we've been talking about so far today. The architect or other lead designer designs the project and puts together the construction documents and lets them out for bid. And then the general contractor and the subcontractors all assemble their bid, and the lowest bid is awarded. So the general contractor pulls together the sub bids and submits just one general bid. So in this kind of process, the lowest bid gets the project. And this kind of process is often required in public projects. Well, there's another approach called design build, where the designer and the contractor are the same legal entity. Often they're the same company. So you don't have to do bidding here because you designed it, you're going to build it, you're responsible for the whole thing. So that's design build. There's another method called CMGC, which does not use bidding. I think. Now, some public entities like LCC use CMGC. So it puts a selected contractor, project manager in charge. And that person oversees the whole process. Then there's an integrated delivery process, which you often find in things like green building projects where it's really an integrated collaborative process. We can't use this in a public entity like a city building because it doesn't include bidding. Part of project delivery involves scheduling, and in scheduling, normally you go from one step, you finish out that step, then you move on to the next step. In a process called fast track, the designer has not completed all of the design before the bidding and construction begins. So the designer may have some of the design done, and they may have, let's say, the foundation plan done, and the foundation contractor can begin building while the designer is still working on the wall design and so forth. This winds up cutting the delivery time. I want to say a word about some kinds of forms and paperwork you'll run into with these three acronyms. RFQ stands for Request for Qualifications, and this is related to the bidding process. You don't want everybody in the world submitting bids because a lot of them won't be qualified and it just takes time to go through. So you kind of sort them through by first doing this formal process, asking for people to tell you why they are qualified. Then you, and by you I mean your firm, your architect or whoever is in charge, sends out an RFP, a request for proposal, to the people who were qualified. And oftentimes in a major project, after the RFP goes out and people submit proposals, then there'll be a whole interview process. Last slide. Wherever you are in the process, you might need to request information from someone, and often this happens after construction is underway. For that kind of question asking and information requesting, you submit an RFI, a request for information. And notice how, again, this is a formal written document. You don't just call up your buddy on the phone and say, hey, by the way, such and such, okay, nice talking to you. It's all recorded and it's all written down in a formal way. So you might need to know what size of steel tube did you really intend to use under these stair treads? I think I don't have the right number or something. And then you write that down and then you do a change order. So everything is recorded and formalized.